And fantastic. Okay, so I am Soumia Bardhan. I'm Associate Professor of Communication and Interim Director of International Studies at the University of Colorado, Denver. And I am joined by my co-author, Sihang Shu, and I'll let her introduce herself before we get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sihang Shu, and I prefer Unique. I'm very excited to collaborate with Dr. Bardhan at this conference. I'm a nominal graduate student from UC Denver. Okay, I'm going to hand this to Dr. Bardhan.
Well, thank you so much, Unique. So, what we have for you today is a project in progress, and we are excited to share some of our preliminary findings with you. The title is of our project is From Deficit Narratives to Empowered Voices, Reimagining Purpose and Equity in Research with International Students. So, the goal of this collaborative project is to rethink international student research as an act of empowerment and resistance. So, to really move beyond the deficit based narratives to a more strength based approach to advocate for methodological innovation that fosters purpose, equity, and agency. So, in other words, to really approach collaborations, scholarly collaborations between international students and faculty from an asset based lens to look at these collaborations as ways and means for growth for both faculty and students, and also to be able to use methodologies and analytical frames that are unique to be able to contribute to a conversation that fosters purpose, equity, and agency. So, with that goal, we employ nexus analysis and solicited diaries as our methodological and analytical frames to examine the intersection of language, discourse, and social action alongside reflective narratives that document international students' lived experiences and their journey through academia. So, to elaborate on what I just shared with you, in our specific project, or our specific project is grounded in Sihang's or Unique's journey as an international student in US academia. And in that, our inquiry illustrates how culturally responsive mentorship, iterative dialogue with faculty mentors, and collaborative research actively counters systemic inequities. So, with that goal, what we are trying to do is through solicited diaries, which is this sort of data collection method by through the use of audio, video, or visual diaries over a period of time to document experiences to capture Unique's academic navigation. And momentarily, Unique is going to share some excerpts from her diary entries, and we have used those diary entries as data for this project. And we have started analysis of those diary entries to really answer this larger question of how inclusive mentorship fosters critical reflection, agency, and scholarly growth, not just for students, but also faculty and those who are involved in these collaborative endeavors. Okay, so at this point, I will hand it to Unique, who will share a few excerpts, not all because we don't have time for that, a few excerpts from her diary entries. And once she's done, I will end with some findings and analysis before concluding this presentation. Unique, please go ahead.
Thanks to Dr. Bardhan's detailed explanation of our project, I will share my study diary entries with my professor when doing a research project. Avoiding biases in academic research. In August 2023, I came up with my research topic for a course and my master's project on analyzing how the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, also known as EEAL, perpetuates the long-standing stereotypes of Asians and Asian Americans. Especially, I perceive how the main female character shaped a stereotypical Chinese immigrant mother from my Chinese perspective. However, my professor suggests I change my research topic because it sounds narrow-minded without an objective evaluation. He suggested adding politics first because the historical background of the film's broadcasting was during a challenging period when Asian hate arose, and then reflected on how the politic moment reshaped the representations in the movie, as he commented. Before addressing cultural representations, tackling the ways anti-Asian hate was produced in this country, we saw a movement to demonize Asians as carriers of COVID, the China flu, and all that. So let's have you examine that rhetorical and how it created a wave of violence against Asian Americans and Asian immigrants. Doing this would show how the cultural representations you want to address are a response to a specific political moment. That would be powerful. However, I did not follow his suggestion because I did not want to cover any politic component of my project due to the power difference and cultural sensitivity. His suggestion of including politics is very beneficial to my project, but conflicts with my cultural sensitivity because I grew up in a place where people barely to talk about politics. After several emails to communicate with my professor about my concerns, we reached a consensus that he agreed not to include any politic elements inside. My professor also pointed out that I pre-commented the film without watching the whole film based on my own cultural perspective, and I only concentrated on the negative part of the film EEAO. This helped me to realize that my bias have influenced my research interests while conducting a scientific study. This issue is very common in my community with other Chinese international students because we frequently discuss how the film EEL reshaped and created new stereotypical images of Chinese immigrant families, such such as running a laundromat. This issue highlights the fact that deeply ingrained cultural backgrounds often influence Chinese international students' research study. As I use critical thinking to view the film from my Chinese cultural perspective is understandable. I deny the value and critique the film as unfair and lacking academic rigor. My professor provided critical feedback on my research topic, challenging my approach and encouraging a broader, more inclusive perspective. His insights pushed me to reconsider my research interests and refine my research questions. However, initially, I was very insistent about my viewpoint without a broader perspective and academic rigor. These interactions between my professor and I enhance my own value of academic collaboration, especially when engaged with people from different identity positions and national background. My achievements in this course showcase how constructive feedback can reshape research direction and enhance critical thinking. His suggestions also taught me to balance the critique of progress achieved in middle representations. This encouraged me to develop a more comprehensive analysis of how contemporary films contribute to the visibility of non-mainstream communities. The second example is a conflict caused by cultural differences and misunderstanding. In September 2023, I wrote an email to my professor after our first Zoom meeting to explain more about my intention of analyzing how films cause stereotypes because I still want to continue my original research topic for my master's project. I wrote, my original research aims to analyze how movies shape audiences' worldviews and reinforce cultural stereotypes, especially for non-native English speakers. Moreover, we can provide efficient solutions to improve the balance of intercultural communication by understanding how these prejudice and stereotypes are created and reinforced through popular culture. My professor replied to my email very quickly, highlighting the phrase reinforced cultural stereotypes in yellow and leaving his comment in red. Don't begin the work by assuming you know what they do. Instead, watch and study the films first. Do this with an open mind, not a pre-chosen conclusion. He pointed out that I judge the film with preconceived thoughts without watching the whole film, which is a type of academic bias, as his emphasis is on an open mind. The use of red color and the lack of face-to-face communication at that time led to my misunderstanding and uncertainty. In my cultural background, we often consider the color red as aggressive and passionate, especially using such a bright red color, which caused me anxiety and fear at that time. However, I continued writing to my professor and briefly expressed my feelings about misunderstanding his words. He responded immediately and encouraged me not to doubt myself because research projects always take lots of twists and turns, and I can learn along the way. This conversation between my professor and me showcased that cultural differences could cause conflict or misunderstanding between faculty and students. Noticeably, the faculty realized his words might get interrupted while communicating with a non-American student, and he quickly changed his formal communication format into a more comfortable way for international students. Therefore, through our open and honest communication, I readjusted my mindset and re-evaluated my research topic, and I gradually realized that my professor did not trying to deny the value of my research topic. Instead, he encouraged me to jump out of the limitations I had imposed on my research interests and gain a more comprehensive perspective to view a film's progress. This allowed me to recognize a positive signal of the increasing inclusion and diversity for minority communities on screen. While compared to the past, this had proven that our academic scientific research had brought societal enhancements. This interaction also made me deeply thinking about creating a safe learning environment for international students. As many faculty members understand that international students have their own fears and other negative emotions while studying abroad. Not every faculty member has such international study experiences. International students studying in Western countries often face language issues, translating their native language into English. This mode of communication can sometimes lead to misunderstanding, as cultural differences may cause native English speakers to overlook particular phrasing and expressions when communicate with international students. My professor is an American who might get used to using low context communication, and his phrase has no extra meaning behind it. But my green background in China is different, and I was trained to use a high context communication style to decode words with extra meanings. Therefore, to collaborate with international students in academic research, we should consider students' cultural backgrounds for better mentorship. No, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Bardhan.
Thank you so much, Unique. So, as you just heard, these were only two excerpts from about 8 to 10 diary entries that we are analyzing. These two were from one of her experiences in one of her courses during her period of graduate study at UC Denver. And what we are trying to do is use what is known as a nexus analysis, which is analysis that focuses on the intersection of language, discourses, and social action, to see, what are some of our findings through this, to reveal how these collaborative engagements, be those scholarly initiatives that focus on, that lead to maybe some kind of publication, some kind of conference presentation, or just even international student experiences within the classroom, or even outside the classroom in their day-to-day journey in this context in US academia. So, to reveal how these collaborative engagements disrupt structural inequities by centering equity and empowerment, mostly focused on what kind of empowering moves, or what kind of agency can international students gain through these collaborations. But not just that, also through these collaborations, how everyone who's involved in this, everyone who's experiencing these interactions, can grow through these collaborations, and how these might challenge dominant narratives, stereotypes, and really cultural prejudice. So, by shifting international student research from really a space of marginalization, where we are only looking at deficits, for instance, things like, language issues, things like, okay, working with international students might be more labor intensive, and so on, to one of advocacy, renewal, approaching this from an asset based, strength based perspective, where both parties or everyone involved is growing through intercultural interactions. This project aims to demonstrate how reimagined methodologies, and in this case, reflective diary entries and inclusive mentorship, challenge dominant power structures in academia. So, in conclusion, what we are trying to argue is that purpose building in international student research is both an act of self preservation, specifically on the part of the international students, as well as resistance against systemic oppression or dominant paradigms. So, by embracing innovative research designs and relational methodologies where there's enough scope for reflection, we call for a renewed commitment to intercultural understanding, the amplification of marginalized voices in academic spaces, and the ethical transformation of international student research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. And it was lovely to hear the voice of Sihang as well in the research process.